All right. Hello, everyone. I'm joined by author Clarke Wainikka, and we're here today to talk about her new book, Edge of Ether. It's a very good book. I read it myself. Cannot recommend it enough. But Clarke, so this is not the first book that you've written. Actually, you've got The Resemblance, All Junkies Float, and Cedar Dolls. What differences and or similarities did you notice in writing Edge of Ether versus the other books you've written before?
Well, Jack, nice to see you. And my dear friend Jack, taking time out of his day to ask me questions, really appreciate it. It's very different than my other books, I would say. I mean, the other books kind of follow the formula of murder mysteries, and they kind of drop you right into a situation or a body within the first, 25 pages, while Edge of Ether is not that at all. In fact, it's probably the least violent of the books that I have. But that's not to say that it's not fast paced and it's not action oriented. It's just a totally different structure from The Resemblance or All Junkies Float, which just follow the perspective of different characters that are experiencing chaos around them, while Edge of Ether is chaos internal to Herrick, the main character. So it was a little bit of a learning experience, but I had written a sci-fi speculative fiction before. I've always been like such a huge fan of post-apocalyptic and dystopian stuff, and that was kind of always where I wanted to be. But I just have a deep love for a classic murder mystery, so that was where I wanted to like refine my writing skills. But Edge of Ether was always this thing that I knew I wanted to do, and I wanted to get it out, and I'd been working on it and writing on it while I was releasing All Junkies Float and Cedar Dolls. So it was always kind of going on behind the scenes, but totally different structure wise. The outline for Edge of Ether is complete madness, say, upon review, like looking at it, it's just multiple pages and timelines glued together. But it took a lot more planning. It took a lot more outlining. It took a lot more understanding of the world, because the world is not our world comparatively to Junkies Float or Resemblance, which all take place, in the States and in Canada. This is not that. It takes place in a completely different environment, completely different situation. It's a dystopian future. Um, Plus, in addition to the characters being a little bit more complex, I feel like in Edge of Ether.
Yeah, absolutely. The characters are. We'll get to the characters. I have a few questions about that, but
Okay.
so this book had a lot of outlining, a lot of planning. I remember talking to you about it. How long did it take from the genesis of or the idea of writing Edge of Ether and turning it into the actual novel that we see today? What's the timeline look like for this?
Okay. What year is it? 2023?
Yeah,
Okay.
2023
I
now.
think I think I started the idea for Edge of Ether maybe at the end of 2019. I originally had this idea for I wanted it to be like a near future sci-fi. Actually, the original idea for Edge of Ether came from a Vox video. Vox.
Yeah, yeah.
VOX. I think Vox is that. I think that's it. They had a video that was called "Neuroscientist Explains a Concept on 5 different levels." So it was a neuroscientist explaining, starting with a kid, and then a high school student, a college
Mm,
student, a PhD student, and an expert about the premise of uploading human consciousness. And that was where the whole
okay.
idea came from. And actually, I'll see if I can find the video link. It's still out there. Um, and I just thought it was so fascinating the way he talked about, and it talks about this in the book too, about how our neurons are kind of binary, how they're one and zero. They're either on or off. They're either working and they're not working. And how that can translate to computers and data and being uploaded. And I just thought the concept itself was fascinating. So I had this idea to do a near future psychological thriller. But then when I started writing things and I started outlining, I just realized that I need more time to do what I wanted to do. I need there to be more of a gap between where we are now and where things end up in the book. Um, yeah, I don't know. The whole process was probably 3 years all in.
Okay.
Yeah, until the first time I completed it. And then I did multiple rounds of edits and then completed it again and then completed it again.
Listen, you got to make it look perfect at the end, right? So
Exactly.
also, so kind of with multiple edits, you might have an internal monologue going about it. Internal monologue plays a big part in this story. How was navigating that aspect in your writing? Because Oz has conversations with people around him, but then at certain points in the book, he's having these in-depth, simultaneous conversations with something in his head, right? How did you go about navigating that while writing? That can be tricky to balance multiple conversations happening in parallel.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like that came with just understanding who Oz was as a character. And Oz, in general, is this type of person that is constantly reflecting in his head about what's going on in front of him. And he like will appraise situations, usually have some negative mindset about it, decide that he it doesn't belong where he is, or will make decisions based on what's going on around him that might not reflect reality. So I think that really just came with knowing who he was, knowing how he was going to react to certain scenarios, knowing how he would respond to other people. Also, this thing that in his head, this kind of venom like character that ends up developing in his brain that he holds conversations with. But also, I had to consider the fact that Max, who is this other character that's kind of growing in Oz's head, that he has a personality, but his personality is completely based on Oz, but like slightly different. So I really had to decide where the nuances were going to be between the two of them, between Max and Oz, and like how Oz would feel about those types of things. I think it really just came down to knowing the characters and how they're going to respond to certain scenarios.
Yeah. Speaking of characters, one of the ways that this book sticks out to me is how well developed mostly the main characters, even some of the side characters, are developed. Any particular inspiration for any of these characters that you can bring to mind? Like who or what inspires Oz to be the way Oz is? Who inspires Maud to be the way she is? Like or Drew as well. Like anything stick out to you
Mm.
from the writing?
With Oz, at the time that I first started writing, I was watching a lot of Altered Carbon. So I was
Mm.
a little inspired by, the tough guy, cyberpunk lead, right? Like
Yeah.
that type of thing. But I also wanted to make him very insecure and to have his own internal struggles and to be realistic. Um, I'm not sure if that really came from any specific spot, just that really thinking about if you were to grow up in an environment where you were super, super rich, but your parents pretty much neglected you and didn't tell you when to go to bed or didn't cook meals for you or didn't spend time with you, like how is that going to affect you as an adult? That was really where Oz developed. It was just thinking about how his past was affecting him as an adult. With Maud, um, she does have just have a little bit of specific inspiration from somebody in my life. But
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'm gonna name drop that.
Okay.
And it's not like her personality really, but how she appears and her professional demeanor are a little bit based on some people that, I know that are so good at putting on the face of being corporate professional and like it doesn't crack type of thing, and like will charm you with the way that they talk and the way that they hold themselves. But maybe there's other stuff going on behind the scenes, which we get a little bit of insight into Maud in Edge of Ether, but there's still like a few question marks around her character and things. um drew Drew came from, first of all, the need for another perspective for Syntax to like
Hmm.
explain what was going on in the corporation. And I wanted her to be a perfectionist. And I guess that comes from a little bit of my own, what's the word, struggles, I
Yeah.
guess, because I consider myself kind of a perfectionist and I've been working on it over the past few years to not be as hard on myself. But I did take some of those aspects, I feel like, from my own personal and then also other people that I know that struggle with perfectionism. And like how they deal with those things and how that affects your work ethic, because Drew is like just really, business. She doesn't say a lot. She's just to the point, and wanted to succeed in the business that she was in. And then things end up getting flipped on their head. And she kind of struggles with that. But it doesn't stop her from just being this research oriented person. I wanted her to be smart. I wanted her to be clever. I wanted her to um, problem solve and to be supportive to Oz as he goes through some of this other stuff as well. Drew is actually one of my favorite characters, but I would love to spend more time on her, say, for example, if there is a sequel.
Yeah, well, okay. So we'll get to that again later as well. Um, Artificial intelligence plays a big role in this book. Obviously, it's near future, dystopian, but AI is a big talking point, and in the world in general right now, AI is a big talking point. Was there any? Did you particularly want to write about AI, or was it more just AI as a part of a lot of tech dystopias, and that ended up coming later on in the process?
Yeah, no, it wasn't originally planned to be an AI book. It
Okay.
was planned to be about the Connectome project, to be about this data uploading human consciousness to a server. That was like kind of the original premise. But when I got the idea, and this is a little bit spoilery, I'm going to try to keep this in vague terms. When I got the idea that what Oz was going to go through and what he was going to experience, as the tumor growing on his brain and causing brain cancer, developing into full consciousness, that made me think about, okay, if this is developing a consciousness, what would people use this for in this type of world? They would likely use it for AI. I would use it in the world. It's called casks, that they put these consciousness into these synthetic, half synthetic bodies, essentially. So it's not really a main. It wasn't planned to be kind of the main theme of the book, and I still don't really think it's the main theme of the book. It's just kind of a tertiary
Yes.
thing that happens within the tech world. I think that's pretty normal for dystopian tech-based fiction, that we do see AI like influencing the world a little bit. And especially, with Maud's story as well. You see
Mm-hmm.
her, again, trying not to spoil anything. You see her story, just like how it ties in with the AI of the world, and how her perspective on AI, I guess. And you kind of get a little bit of everything in that circumstance, but yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sweet. Anything like, as the writer, obviously you love the whole thing, but is there any lines or sections or characters that like speak out to you personally? Anything favorite? Any favorites you have? Looking back at it.
Oh, I really like the scene where Oz is in the cabin and
Mm-hmm.
listens to his father talking to Maud when he's in the ether, and he listens to his father talking to Maud about basically what led to his whole experience and this whole stuff he's been going through. And then when Drew shows up as a possum, like within that same scene, I just love those little type of like weird details that your brain would probably do, like if you were in a dream, right? And when you're in a dream, you don't question that this is strange at the time that it's
Yeah.
happening. And Oz doesn't really question it. The fact that Drew is talking to him like through a baby possum, he just like accepts this. But then it's also coupled with this really emotional scene between him and his dad, and that whole kind of closure scene that he gets there. I really like. I just think it's simple in the way that it's done, and that there's not a lot of like there's not a huge monologue from Oz about what his dad did to him or how he feels. It's just basically his dad apologizing, and that from there it goes forward. I also really like Jacob Jacob Ecker,
Yes.
who is like the henchman of Oz's father. I just think he's a fun character, and I really like how he reacts to Oz's dad's I won't say. Okay, I really like how he reacts like later on in the book. I feel like when you get to third of the way through, he has like a little bit of a change in his character, but he's still a minor character. And I also love Maud. she's just this like villain that I I really wanted to show her side from things, and also just wanted her to have this huge chip on her shoulder.
Jacob actually was one of my favorite characters. He has one of the biggest growth arcs, but he's also a side character. So it's
I know.
cool to have his little subplot happening. Like if you're building out a
Mhm.
cinematic universe, you could have him be his own little like the story of Jacob's life. But along
For
those
sure.
lines, for those of us who've read it and gotten to the end, and throughout the entire book, there is a lot of world building you've done here, and you've set it up to where the book has a very, very satisfying conclusion, but also leaves a few threads kind of left open for expansion or thoughts. Is there any plans to develop that any further? Any plans to add to this book, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to do more books set in the Moscow arcology. I mean, that's I knew probably about a quarter of the way in that I had enough ideas to fill out a series. And then when I finished the book the first time, and I talked to you about this before, Jack. It had a different ending
Mm-hmm.
originally. And then I realized that I didn't have the time to expand on all the ideas that I had. So I completely rewrote the ending. I slowed down some of the pacing, and just gave more time for Oz to breathe and to get closure. But I had like this whole rebellion arc written out, which with Drew like being kind of in the leadership position, and some new characters that had come in at the end. And then I just decided there was not enough time to do it and develop it out properly. So I would love to expand out on some of the minor characters, like he's saying. Like I would love to see more about Jacob and more about his story and more about Drew, and also Maud. Like she's still out there at the end of the
Yeah.
book, and like there's not really a resolution in terms of the societal issues that are going on and the politics. Yeah, I would love to do more. Like there are whole other cities within the arcology that I would like to um explore. And definitely if people want it, I even if people don't want it, I probably will be writing a sequel. I think it will happen.
Awesome. Cool. With that, I think we got a good amount of stuff here. Anything else that you want to say before we close out here?
Yeah, I mean, I want to thank you, Jack. I think that you've been an amazing support to me, not only as an author, but as a friend. That not only like did you come on as a beta reader, but you've just been incredibly supportive. And I want to thank anybody who's read the book, and gotten all the way to the end and supports Oz Herrick. Justice for Oz Herrick. I would just, yeah, I'm just so grateful to be able to do what I do and be able to share stories, and yeah, very happy.
Yeah, so again, guys, you can go and get the book. It's Edge of Ether. It's on Amazon, or is there anywhere to get it besides Amazon? Can you get it at other places?
Not yet.
Okay.
Usually, what ends up happening when I publish is that it ends up getting picked up by Barnes and Noble in chapters. Usually, a couple months after, like maybe December, we might see it with Barnes and Noble or chapters. You can always request it, like to be ordered by your local bookstore type of thing, because they can order it off of Amazon. But Amazon's definitely the best place if you're local to where I am. I'll sell books locally. I have been considering doing some like an event, like a book signing or something like
Yeah.
that. Because some people have asked me. It's just a lot of logistics to do, but I would love to do something like that in the future.
Yeah, can confirm. Live in Europe right now. You can get the book in Europe. You can get it all over the place if you order through Amazon. So don't let the fact that you might not live in the same country or continent stop you from getting it.
Yes, worldwide,
Worldwide.
baby.
Awesome.
Hmm.
Well, have a great night, Clark. And anybody watching this, if you haven't, please go ahead and get the book. And if you do, leave a review, all that good stuff. And have a great evening.
Bye.